Right, let's focus on Leicester now and the departure of yesterday of Brendan Rodgers and their search for a new manager. Well, the Leicester City correspondent for the Leicester Mercury, Jordan Blackwell, joins us now. Jordan, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. First of all, give us a bit of an insight. How did the board arrive at the decision? How hard was that decision for them to make?
Well, it was a huge decision, really. It was very much based on the performance that we saw at Crystal Palace on Saturday. The first of a run of 6-pointers that Leicester have over the final couple of months of the season. And they really didn't play very well in it. I know Palace only scored their goal, the winner, in the last minute, but they were dominant throughout. I think the shot count was 31-3, which is the biggest gulf in any game, any Premier League game this season. I think there'd been plenty of opportunities during this season where perhaps other clubs would have sacked Rodgers for, the situation that Leicester were in and how they were performing. But I think they had really wanted to stand by him and they had wanted to stick with him. They had that really dreadful start. They had a couple of really heavy defeats, the likes of Brighton and Tottenham. But eventually, I think they started to fear for their Premier League future with the way that Palace game went, and obviously dropping into the relegation zone with the defeat.
Obviously, you talk about recent form and form this season, but how do you think his sort of 4 years at the club will be looked at when you think of the FA Cup win, a couple of seasons where Leicester finished 5th back-to-back? What do you think his legacy will be at the club?
Well, I think with a bit of time and a bit of breathing space, I think it will probably be looked on fondly. I think particularly with the FA Cup win, it was the first time in Leicester's history that they've won it. That going into that final against Chelsea, they had the record of, the most finals of any club without ever winning it. So they kind of put that behind them. They finally got their hands on the one trophy they were missing. So I think in that sense, it will be looked on very fondly. But I think for now, it's probably difficult for supporters to reflect on the Rodgers legacy too positively, because it's felt like it's been going wrong. It's felt like they've been on a bit of a downward spiral for maybe sort of 18 months, maybe even longer. If you look back to, say, the elimination from the Europa League and dropping down into the Conference League, they had the kind of humiliating exit from the FA Cup. When they lost 4-1 at Nottingham Forest. So there's been moments over the past 18 months that's kind of meant that maybe fans won't reflect so positively on Rodgers' time at the club at the moment. But yes, maybe in a couple of years' time, with a bit of breathing room, they might sort of think about it in wholly positive terms.
Yeah, and Jordan, obviously all the talk now is who will come in next, who will be best placed to actually keep Leicester in the Premier League. What's your understanding of who might be on that shortlist?
Well, because of the nature of this decision and because it has come at this time, I don't think the club had a particular shortlist, for this situation right now. But in the past, they have liked Graham Potter, who's obviously conveniently, out of a job right now. I think, we've seen in the past that Leicester do tend to lose players to bigger clubs. And in those situations, they always form shortlists of potential replacements. During Rodgers' sort of very good period when they were finishing 5th and when he was attracting interest from bigger clubs like Arsenal, they did that as well. They put together lists of potential managers that they could look at should Rodgers be poached by other clubs. And Graham Potter was on that list. That was when he was sort of impressing at Brighton. I think at the time, Leicester probably felt that they would be a step up from Brighton, and that Potter's brand of football would fit in well with Leicester as a club. So I think the fact that he's now available, I think Leicester are a similar club to Brighton, not the same as Chelsea. I think I don't think the fact that Potter didn't really get on at Chelsea and they struggled a little bit, I don't think that will affect Leicester's opinion of him. I think they would feel he would be able to do a good job at Leicester. But obviously, there's the situation that he may not want to come straight back into management. I'm sure there's payoffs to negotiate. So it may be the case that Leicester look for a short-term option to get them through to the end of the season and then reassess from there.
Yeah. Jordan, you obviously watch the team week in, week out. Do you expect them to survive the drop? We know how close it is at the bottom at the moment. I mean, yes, they're in the bottom 3, but 3 points and things look a little bit different. You're suddenly up to 13th in the table.
Yeah, I think before the international break, I think I did expect them to survive. They didn't have a particularly good run of form during March, but the nature of some of those defeats, I think they created enough chances in those games to perhaps deserve, something from them. I think there was still something lacking in the performances, kind of an acknowledgement of the predicament they were in. But in terms of the quality of their play, they were creating opportunities. I think the Palace game probably changed my opinion a little bit, because I think now they've got this run of fixtures where they are playing teams around them, and that should be viewed as a positive. But because they are all 6-pointers, because there are so many teams in the relegation battle, there is an extra pressure on those games. And then you're sort of asking the questions of whether the squad's got the fight for those types of games. And I would say the Palace game showed they didn't. Palace, wiped the floor with them really, even though it was only sort of 1 goal difference in the scoreline. So I think that was a concern, but I think perhaps now they have changed the manager. I probably do feel like it's more likely that they will survive. I think the atmosphere at tomorrow night's game against Aston Villa will be much better. I think it could have been, a really toxic, angry atmosphere among Leicester fans who haven't been happy for a long time. But I think now even though there'll only be caretakers in charge, I do think that the atmosphere will be better. And with the fixtures they have, they should get to safety, and obviously with the quality of players that they have, particularly in attack as well.
Yeah, big game this week. I suppose big 10 games left. I suppose regardless of whether they stay up or not, do you think the club are going to be going through a bit of a reset this summer, certainly in terms of some of the players that they've got, some maybe leaving and obviously some coming in?
Yeah, I think so. I think they probably needed it last summer, and I think if you were to ask Brendan Rodgers where the downfall came, I think he would point to that. I think he felt that at that point, being 3 full years into the job, he needed a refresh of the squad. Maybe his ideas weren't, getting across so easily. Maybe he felt things had gone a little bit stale. But obviously they didn't do that. They had a really sort of barren summer, in the sense that they didn't really bring anyone in. Obviously they Kasper Schmeichel left, and they eventually sold Wesley Fofana and brought in Wout Faes, but that was it as far as their transfer business went. And I think at that point there were a lot of players that maybe were being told that they could leave to find other clubs, and maybe there were some players that felt they wanted to move on to better things. And I think you ended up with a squad of players that didn't necessarily, were not necessarily totally happy to be there. So I think, given the amount of players they've got out of contract this summer, obviously there's a decision to be made over James Maddison as well, because he only has a year left on his contract. So if he's not going to sign a new one, Leicester either need to sell him this summer, or they potentially lose him on a free transfer the following year. So with all those factors, I think, yes, this will be a big summer for Leicester in terms of the rotation of their squad and a refresh of the squad, and under a new manager as well.
Jordan, thank you so much for coming on. Some really brilliant insight there. We'll chat to you soon.
Thank you.